Hello, religious studies friends. Today we are going to try and roll through Song of Solomon, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, and Ezekiel. Let's see how it goes. Okay, starting off strong with Song of Solomon or Song of Songs. This is extremely explicit, openly erotic language. It is been disputed as this is not part of the Old Testament. Cannot possibly be the Bible. But as it turns out, it is, and it's part of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and it's part of everything. So there's really no getting around it. It is the Bible. It is affirming that love is not embarrassing. Again, it's like very descriptive, very erotic, it's worse if you know Hebrew. It teaches that God created love, romance, and sex for two people who are in a loving, committed relationship. Now, some people who don't like that kind of language say, oh, it's just an allegory about God's love for Israel. But the language doesn't really support that. The original Hebrew doesn't really support that. And it's actually kind of weird. The language is like very explicit about like loving the woman's breasts and just how much he loves her. And it's like very descriptive of their time together. And it actually is weirder if that is an allegory about how God feels about Israel. So it is what it is. It's just a very erotic book of the Bible talking about how much he loves his woman. Isaiah. Yahweh is salvation is what this means. It's a great work of poetry in the original language. It's written during the Assyrian-Babylonian threat to Israel. So this is like in the middle of sort of war and conflict, and people are nervous and what's going to happen. This is the beginning of the belief in the coming Messiah. So there's a lot of prophetic things about Jesus and the Messiah, and everything's going to get better because the Messiah will save us all. Spelled wrong. So writes primarily about a coming judgment, which is going to be the fall of Israel, and everyone's going to be taken to Babylon as exiles. And then it is a lot about Jesus and the Messiah and what is going on there. Okay. This is where we get books like though your sins are like scarlet, they will be white as snow. If you've heard this phrase, it's several songs, it's several pictures. It's just this picture of your sin being red and then Jesus making it white. This is from the book of Isaiah. This is not from primarily the New Testament. This is from the book of Isaiah. This book is a major book of prophecy related to the coming of the Messiah. The most referenced book in the New Testament is related to Jesus. So 1 out of 17 verses in the New Testament are related to Isaiah. Essentially, it is just laying out what the Messiah will look like very specifically. So when you hear people talk about Jesus has to be the Messiah, very minute details were predicted in Isaiah. A lot of them. It's a long book. There's a lot of very specific, very random things coming out of the book of Isaiah about what the prophet will look like. And then, 1,500-ish years later, you actually get the birth of Jesus and what that looks like. And so it's a fabulous study if you ever want to sit down or do it as a Bible study or do something that actually is really fun to look at all the Isaiah prophecies and then all the things about Jesus. It's just kind of a fun mix and match. So that is Isaiah, primarily a prophecy about the coming Messiah. Okay, so now we have Jeremiah. So this is where it starts to get. So Isaiah was predicting, hey, Israel could fall. This could be bad. Jeremiah's he was known as the weeping prophet because he actually lived to see his prophecy come true, and he lived to see the Babylonians destroy Jerusalem. He's a contemporary with Zephaniah and Habakkuk, who we will read about later. Jeremiah means Yahweh lifts up. So some interesting things about Jeremiah and what's going on here. So this is a timeline. I think in your quiz, it is put it in order. So first, Nebuchadnezzar defeats Egypt. So like, right, this is modern day Israel, by the way. First Egypt, and then you got to know you're coming for the nation of Israel here. So Nebuchadnezzar defeats Egypt, and then 3 years later, we know that Nebuchadnezzar has control of Israel because Daniel is taken captive, and the book of Daniel is written about his time in Babylonian captivity. Then by 597 BC, Nebuchadnezzar / Babylon captures Jerusalem, and the king and there's exiles. All by 597, Nebuchadnezzar has taken the king and all the exiles to Babylon. By 586, so remember it's reverse time. We're going from, like 1000 BC to 500 to 300 to 200 to like 0 is technically when Jesus is born. Okay, so we're going down in time. So this happened first, then this, then this, then this, if that makes sense, because we're going the opposite way. We're counting down to 0 when we start AD time, which is the time we have now. So in 586 BC or BCE, the temple is finally destroyed, which was prophesied. Everyone in Judah is deported to Babylon, except Jeremiah got to stay and continue his ministry with the few people who were left behind. So Jeremiah actually gets to stay, but everyone else is taken to Babylon. He gets to stay with the few people who are still there. So that is the book of Jeremiah, the weeping prophet. Now, Jeremiah was weeping, and now we just have a full-on book of wailing and sadness, lamentations, to lament, to be sad, to cry. So this entire book is just sadness and lamenting over the fall of Jerusalem. Reading Lamentations is very common in Jewish festivals and also at mourning ceremonies. So at funerals and things of this nature, anytime when it's supposed to be somber, you will usually read from the book of Lamentation. Portrays Jerusalem as a grieving widow mourning her loss, compares the loss of the country and their people and their way of life to a grieving woman who has lost her husband. It does sort of at the end wrap it up with a promise of hope and a new beginning for Israel when they are finally brought back to the homeland and have a chance to obey God and begin a better relationship. But it's mostly just a book of sadness, just a book of lamentations and like, oh, why were we so bad? And now we are in Babylon. Okay, Ezekiel has 3 visions. In the first one, the Lord appears and commissions him as a prophet to his fellow Israelites. In the second one, Ezekiel sees the glory of God depart from Jerusalem and saw him remove his protection because the people defiled his temple with wickedness. And in the third one, he saw the glory of God return to Jerusalem after the rebuilding of the temple. So those are the main 3 parts and the 3 visions. So he has a vision, talks about it, has a vision, talks about it, has a vision, talks about it. And he gets all of that done. And again, here is the Babylonian Empire, Israel, and Egypt, just for context. Okay, Ezekiel, there is again, so here he has these 3 visions. One of the things that will be recognized in Ezekiel is there is a vision of dry bones that is often used in songs. So you will hear dry bones. There's a vision of God renewing Israel or a vision of dry bones coming to life. So you also hear that about songs and God bringing things to life. In this, he predicts this Magog invasion. This is Gog. This is Magog. So some would say it was World War II. Some would say it's a war that's still coming. But during this invasion, Israel is fine. So predicts this Magog invasion when Israel is back in its land and these 2 huge empires. So some would say it was a war. It concludes with a return of God's future temple. Eschatological is our theology word today. Eschatological means end of time, talking about the end of time. It concludes with a reference to God's future temple. Eschatology is the study of last things, such as judgment and the end of the world. So today's theology word of the day is eschatology. And today's random fact of the day is wine bottle sizes are named after kings in the Old Testament. Look at that, Nebuchadnezzar.